Want to welcome everyone here today. Want to thank our host, Niagara County Sheriff Mike Filicetti. I am, of course, New York State Senator and Senate Republican leader Rob Ortt. I am joined by several of my colleagues from the state legislature. I'm joined by the sponsor of the bill we're here to talk about today, the PROTECT Act, Senator Pam Helming. Our conference chair represents part of Monroe County and then a district largely in the Finger Lakes. We are joined by Senator George Borrello, my colleague from the Southern Tier area here in Western New York, Assemblyman Angelo Morinello, who represents, like me, Niagara County. Also, we are joined by County Clerk Joe Jastrzemski, Niagara County Sheriff Mike Filicetti, and Monroe County Sheriff Todd Baxter is here as well. And then we're also joined by Pastor Donaldson. And the reason I'm glad the pastor's here, because this bill, when it was being crafted by Senator Helming and her team, they did something that does not happen often in Albany, particularly around the area of, I would say, law enforcement, but even more broadly than that. We've seen, she could certainly tell you, Senator Borrello could tell you, Assemblyman Morinello could tell you, a lot of bills where it seems glaringly, there's a glaring absence of people who are at the table when these pieces of legislation are crafted. So, for instance, when bail reform was put into place, no DAs and no police officers were ever a part of the conversation about reforming the bail laws in New York State in 2019. And we have seen that trend continue. Unlike that, Senator Helming brought in faith leaders, brought in police officers when she was crafting this legislation, because it is important to have people from maybe different perspectives, but that's how you get good legislation. That's how you get good policy. And that's how you get policy that actually keeps people safe and is maybe more fair or more just or more humane. And we haven't seen that. We've been thrust into an environment where you seem to have to choose. Either everyone is unsafe, or maybe there's, the other side of the equation where we're not seeking out the most fair or just responses every time. And I would tell you that as New Yorkers, you don't have to pick. It's not a bifurcated reality. You can have both. You can have justice, you can have fairness in front of the law, and we can live in safe communities. We don't have to pick, as sometimes I feel in Albany we've been made to think. For years, for the last several years, we've seen a bevy of legislation sponsored by the Democratic majorities in Albany that has aimed at criminal justice reform. The result has been the same. The result has been more violent offenders in our communities. Full stop. And every law enforcement official could tell you that, and every judge could tell you that. And it's a combination of the way the laws are drafted, handcuffing our judges instead of our criminals, and also we have made law enforcement's job much more difficult in how they police and protect us. They're still out there doing it, but it's more dangerous for them, and it's more dangerous for the people who live in our communities. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just recently, there was a situation in Western New York. Amanda Thompson, murdered by her boyfriend, then boyfriend, former boyfriend. Now, her boyfriend had been arrested for manslaughter and was released by the parole board. And then there had been a domestic situation where police had been contacted yet again with Amanda. And yet this individual remained on the streets where he could ultimately kill Amanda. And when we made some of the changes in bail and discovery, our conference stood up and said this was going to be bad for domestic violence victims specifically, because very often when there's a domestic violence issue, if that person is released on a desk appearance ticket or released with the least restrictive means to ensure their return to court, they are going to, in many cases, they live with the person that there is the issue with. They're going to return to that home. They're going to return to where, and you're going to have a worse situation. And that's exactly what happened. It blows my mind, and we're not here to necessarily talk about the parole board specifically, but it blows my mind that we are releasing cop killers and people who have murdered and killed people, and then we're surprised, I suppose, when they do it again. I'm not surprised. When someone who's been in and out of jail multiple times their whole life, I'm sorry, some people aren't going to be rehabilitated. The goal is to simply remove them from the society so they can't create more victims. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's my view. I'm not here to say that everyone can be rehabilitated, because they can't. The guy on the train in North Carolina is beyond rehabilitation. There's one solution for that person, and I won't say what it is. It's not even jail. It's something else, something more final. Arrested 16 times, 17 times. And we're surprised that he murdered somebody. We're horrified that he murdered somebody. It has become a joke. The justice system right now has become a joke, not just even in New York. And I'll tell you what, in many cases, the train situation, Amanda Thompson, in some ways were unique. But in many cases, we often focus, my colleagues have focused, we hear a lot of conversation about the race and ethnicity when we have these issues. And there's a lot of focus on the race or ethnicity of perpetrators of crimes, right? People who are arrested for crimes. I just don't feel there's that same focus on the victims of the crimes. Because most of these crimes, the victims, are also people of color. They're people who live in communities where the majority of that community are people of color, are ethnic minorities. But that isn't as important as the guy who committed the assault or the robbery or the murder or the rape or whatever. And we have to stop. Ultimately, if you commit a crime, and if you've been in and out of jail multiple times, that has to carry the most weight. Not the color of your skin, not where you come from, not your zip code. If you've been in and out of jail 16 times, 17 times, 21 times, police officer in New York City, killed by a man who was arrested 21 times previously. That is a career criminal whose only answer should be in jail. And yet, there he was on the street, in the community, and he killed a police officer in New York City, I think it was a year and a half ago or so. So that's where the PROTECT Act sort of comes out of. Senator Helming working with, I know, Sheriff Baxter in Monroe County. I do have a piece in Monroe County. The sheriff and I have talked about this. Sheriff Felicetti and I have talked about this. But she wanted to work with law enforcement. Imagine that, a law enforcement bill that takes into account the opinions and thoughts of the people we ask to protect us. That should not be a novel thing, and yet it is. But she took that. That's what leadership is, by the way. That's how you craft real policy. So I want to commend my colleague, Senator Helming, for doing that. I want to commend Sheriff Baxter. He's not sitting there saying, let's just go back. He's saying, how do we go forward? But it ain't with just this. We have to go forward in a smarter way where we listen to the men and women who wear that uniform that we then ask to go and protect us in very dangerous situations. In the city of Rochester, it is a dangerous situation today. Maybe more dangerous than any place in Western New York. And I say that with no degree, certainly, of pride, but it is a fact. But she sat down with faith leaders to hear their perspective, to hear law enforcement's perspective, and this is sponsored by, or at least was, by a Democrat in the Assembly, Billy Jones. Now, Billy Jones left to go work at a college up in the North Country, but he's a Democrat. And he sponsored this bill. This was a bipartisan piece of legislation. And it should be, and it has to be. If we're going to get it passed, it has to be supported by Democrats and Republicans. So yes, everyone standing up here, or at least the electeds, are Republican. But that's who represents Niagara County. But there is no excuse and no reason that Democrats can't support this legislation for the betterment and safety of our communities and our members of law enforcement. I can promise you, not every police officer is a registered Republican. I know several myself that are not. Certainly, faith leaders come from all different backgrounds. And our constituents, when you talk about safety, no one asks, police officer never asks what your voter registration is before they respond to a call. And by the way, the person making the call, they don't ask for their voter registration. They just want someone to come and protect them. Everybody deserves to live in a safe community. Everybody. I don't care what your color is. I don't care where you came from. I don't care how poor you are or wealthy you are. Everyone deserves to live in a safe community. And that's what this act aims to do. I want to let the senator talk about the specifics of, it's her bill. But again, she has done a terrific job putting this legislation together. This doesn't happen enough in our state capitol. And I am proud to call her certainly a friend and a colleague and the sponsor of this bill. And it's my honor to call up my colleague, Senator Pam Helming.
Thank you, Leader Ortt. I appreciate everyone taking the time to be here today. This is an important topic, as the leader said, and I have to say that people, they don't feel safe in our communities. I know lately there have been some reports out saying that data shows that crime is down. I don't believe that's true. I don't know where that data is coming from. I think maybe it's being misinterpreted, because when I look at the data, we are seeing that crime is still well above what it was pre-pandemic. That's what the statistics show. I don't know if others are trying to say that, well, it's a little bit better than 2023. It's not where it needs to be. Again, the public just doesn't feel safe. I hear that all the time from the people I represent. Doesn't matter where I'm at. I just held mobile office hours, 3 different mobile office hours. Number one concern, what are we doing to address the crime issue? What are we doing to keep dangerous people off of our streets? I'm in the grocery store with my husband or at the gas station. I get asked, Pam, what are we doing? We had another homicide. What are we doing to stop this? And my answer to them, I try to be truthful all the time. The response is, we have this problem because New York State is one of the only states in our entire nation, that does not allow courts to consider public safety when making pretrial decisions. That's not good, not good. But of course, when I give people that response, they ask me, well, why not? Why doesn't New York State allow that? And I think that's a very reasonable question, right? When something's broke, you fix it. And that should be the case when it involves something as important as protecting our families, our seniors, and our local businesses. And when we do nothing, when the majority in the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor, when they choose to bury their heads in the sand and do nothing, it jeopardizes another person's life every single day. But the good news, as Senator Ortt said, we have a common sense solution that's targeted policy to fix this problem. It's legislation called the PROTECT Act. And just to give you a little more detail on the PROTECT Act, under this bill, the courts would be required to use a standardized assessment tool that's developed by the New York State Division of Criminal Justice to help determine the potential threat posed by individuals who are charged with a Class A misdemeanor or a felony. So it's not everyone who goes through this process, it's the serious offenders. Individuals who are determined to be a danger to themselves, to the community, or to others can be held pre-trial. And I think this is very important, and this is something we hear about all the time. Under the PROTECT Act, repeat offenders arrested for a new Class A or a felony while on pretrial release will remain in custody unless a judge determines their risk to reoffend has been sufficiently mitigated. We included 3 critical safeguards in this bill. First, judges must make pretrial custody determinations based on risk, not on a person's ability to financially pay for bail. Second, every pretrial custody decision must be made in 48 hours, so no one is held without timely judicial review. And third, the PROTECT Act acknowledges the mental health crisis that contributes to crimes, and it supports mental health interventions. So the leader mentioned Sheriff Todd Baxter, who has been an incredible partner in the development of this bill, and I want to say thank you to the sheriff again. The sheriff has worked so closely with my office and also with a number of consortiums for safer communities across the entire state of New York. And I know the leader mentioned the religious leaders from Monroe County who are here with us today, and I thank you both for being here. of course, the consortium was made up of many religious leaders, many local elected officials, including the mayor from Honeoye Falls, Rick Milne, who's also a Monroe County legislator. Rick, I thank you for being here as well. Our consortiums include a large number of not-for-profit leaders and business leaders. And I just want to comment on how important it was to have the business leaders. Hearing from that, we hear about the tragedies, about the horrendous crimes that occur when repeat offenders are let back out on the streets. But something that really never resonated with me until I heard from the consortiums is how these crimes are driving up costs for business. And that translates into higher costs for everyone on products and goods and services. So I appreciate this very unique, this very diverse team coming together to help us make the best bill possible. Throughout the drafting of the bill, as you can imagine, we listened to the feedback from everyone. And as a result of this incredible, and I have to stress that, incredible team effort and collaboration, we now have a truly nonpartisan policy that will allow us to strengthen current public safety laws, and the bottom line is to protect people. We worked really hard to garner statewide support for this legislation. We have support from the New York State Sheriff's Association, the Monroe County Consortium for Safe Communities, the Finger Lakes Consortium, the Niagara Region Consortium, the Central New York Consortium, Erie County, Lifespan of Greater Rochester, the Monroe County Association of Police Chiefs, the New York State Car Wash, and so many local municipalities. And where we go from here is we're going to continue doing these press conferences across the entire state of New York. As I said, this is an important issue to so many people. We're going to continue to garner support, and we're going to deliver this, again, to the governor and the legislature and really push for them to do one of two things. One, pass the legislation and create the change that's needed. Or two, the governor can put this into her budget language and we can pass it that way. But this is common sense legislation that will help keep dangerous individuals off our streets. And really, I have to say it again, our colleagues in the legislature and the governor owe it to every victim, every law enforcement officer working to keep us safe, and every person who simply wants to live without fear to enact the PROTECT Act. At this time, it is my privilege and honor to introduce Sheriff Baxter.
Thank you. I'm going to echo a few words, but first of all, I want to speak on behalf of law enforcement. There wasn't a law enforcement official, at least in Monroe County, that didn't realize that bail reform needed to occur. We wanted bail reform. Bail reform was implemented years ago. There was no adjustments for decades and decades. It was actually being bastardized the way it was being implemented. With that, we had no input in the corrective action. And with that, we also know that any plan, once it's executed, needs to be evaluated and adjusted. Any plan, a business plan, law, there's no perfect plan ever implemented. Our military experience tells us as soon as you cross the line of departure, you start adjusting your plan. That's just what you do. Where there's no sitting down at the table and saying, how can we make it better? What are the gaps in the system? And we've been screaming since 2019, we law enforcement, knocking on doors at the legislators in Albany, knocking on the governor's doors saying we need to adjust this is bad. We are not able to do our job, public safety, and keep the public safe. We aren't. We're failing at that mission. And we were getting nowhere with that. So we formed these consortiums. We talked to pastors from the inner cities. We talked to crime victim groups. We talked to legislators of how we can get this across the finish line and make just simple adjustments, not go back to where we were with bail reform, clear as day. But there are gaps in the system. We see repeat offenders daily raising havoc. We looked at the books of 4 box stores in Monroe County. They let us look at their unreported theft of $7.3 million over almost 18 months. $7.3 million, 4 stores, Rochester, New York, over 18 months. You and I are paying for that. We can afford it. The poor people in our communities can't afford that. That's not fair. It's not fair to them. And I can show you poster child after poster child of repeat offenders in Monroe County. Here's another staggering thing. The violence that the senator mentioned in the city of Rochester, off the charts. 200% increase in violence, gun violence. And we've done some phenomenal thing with law enforcement. But one of the gaps is where 50% of the people we arrested with guns, which is dangerous business for a police officer, by the way, were released on low bail or no bail. Low bail is $5,000 or less. 50% of the people in Monroe County, hundreds of gun arrests, were released low bail, no bail. When you create law, you also create culture. You told judges least restrictive means. The law did. We've had that adjusted, but the law set that culture. We told them that the judges in law preponderance of release. That's in the parole violation law. Preponderance, you will release people, the preponderance release. We're saying if we catch a guy with a gun in Rochester, New York, an illegal gun, he's probably pretty dangerous. There should be a preponderance of detention. And then, like the sheriff and I in our jails, intervention. Let's give that guy a timeout and intervene in his life. That's all we're asking for. 48 hours, stabilize this person. Let's get them under control. If it's an addiction problem, let's get them in the medical assisted treatment wing of our jails, and let's get them bed to bed as opposed to an appearance ticket and they're adding felony after felony and costing us millions of dollars. This is well-rounded legislation. This is middle of the road. It's not everything I want in law enforcement. I would take out the A-miss and let's just talk about repeat offenders. But we think this is well-rounded, that we can get it across the finish line. We can push this and get bipartisan legislation, which we know we need to push this across the finish line in Albany. So we're not asking for everything. We're just asking for simple adjustments to address a repeat offender and redress these dangerous individuals in our communities, and we know who they are. We can articulate that. And as Senator Helming mentions, we are the only state that doesn't have a danger standard. New Jersey has a danger standard. I always bring that up as a joke. New Jersey has a danger. Why cannot we have a danger standard? And to think about those gun charges, I'll just leave this as a stat. So far in the Monroe County Jail in the last almost 2 years, we've held on federal gun charges over 160 individuals because we could not hold them on state charges. We went out, we got the guy with the gun off the streets of Rochester, and we had to go to our federal partners, wake up magistrates, wake up the ATF, and wake up a federal prosecutor at 3 o'clock in the morning to do the job which state is supposed to do. That's a state function. But we got 160 people off the streets of Rochester. And you ask why crime might be going down, I think we need to give some credit to those law enforcement officials out there risking their lives, and for federal government willing to step up and fill the gap where we have vacancies in our New York State gap. I appreciate the senator for stepping up to the plate, writing this great legislation, middle of the road, bipartisan, we believe. We're just asking the public to consider it and ask questions of your legislators. What is going on here? Why can't you support this? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our host, Sheriff Felicetti, and really appreciate you having us here. Okay.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank Senator Helming for proposing and pushing this legislation forward. Senator Ortt, Senator Borrello for signing on as co-sponsors, and for Assemblyman Morinello, who's always there supporting law enforcement. It's so important for us to have elected leaders here that stand with us in law enforcement, and they really are trying to help us make our communities safer. I also want to recognize a few law enforcement partners that are here. Chief Nick Ligabari from Niagara Falls Police Department is here, and Chief Mike Salata from Lewiston Police. Two of my great partners here in Niagara County. I want to speak a little bit relative to what we see here in Niagara County and how the current laws are affecting the citizens, business owners here in Niagara County. This bill that we're talking about today seeks to address a dangerousness standard for our communities. I think that makes sense to most of us. Who would want a dangerous criminal out on the streets? Who wants repeat offenders out committing crimes again and victimizing more people? And who doesn't want to see an individual with mental health concerns have those addressed? I mean, this to me is common sense. Without this tool, we're seeing repeat offenders here in Niagara County, and we're not different than Monroe County or anywhere else. They're out victimizing the public over and over again, and we're seeing dangerous criminals out to again victimize. So some real world examples. And again, we're not unique here. You all go to stores. When you go into stores here in Niagara County, you're seeing things behind screens, behind locked cabinets, more and more and more things. And I was in a chain store the other day and everything's locked up and I had to wait for somebody to come and get it out. And I was in civilian clothes and I said to the clerk, I said, why is everything locked up? And he looked at me and he said, because everybody's stealing everything. We have to keep it locked up. And then he looked at me and he said, you're the sheriff, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I can't even hide in here in civilian clothes. But this is the point is business owners have to lock all their things up because they can't protect it. They can't do anything about it. Even when we arrest people, they're back stealing again. I would say to you, if bail reform and other flawed criminal justice reforms worked, why do they have to have all their stuff locked up? Why do they have to have all their merchandise locked up? I can tell you that larcenies have spiked. Shoplifting has spiked here in Niagara County with no end in sight. They continue to do it. They've been arrested multiple times, and they just continue to do it. Stolen vehicles is another huge issue that we've been dealing with here. Spiked, no repercussions. you know, some people may say, oh, it's a stolen vehicle. What's the big deal? You know, you come out to your driveway in the morning planning to go to work and your car's gone. Time and time again, we've been dealing with these. And they take the cars, they joyride them, they end up in the next county over. Again and again and again. There's been publications, probably through your news outlets, of people that have been arrested 8, 9 times for stealing cars. And then we're getting in a high-speed pursuit with them here in Niagara County in another stolen car. Why? Why? I don't know why people think this is the norm or it should be acceptable. Senator Ortt mentioned domestic violence victims. Why wouldn't we want to do more to help our domestic violence victims? I mean, we had a case here in Niagara County of an individual, a violent domestic, who was locked up, released, and the victim had some comfort knowing that he was locked up for a little while. Not knowing he got out, she woke up to him standing over her with a knife. I mean, I don't know how many cases we have to see of domestic violence victims being re-victimized because the offenders aren't held. This PROTECT Act fixes a lot of these things I'm talking about. The retail theft, the spike in stolen vehicles, protects domestic violence victims. It's just shocking to me that, again, that people don't see this as common sense legislation. I can give you example after example of repeat offenders that are out committing crimes and dangerous criminals that are out there. I can't say how much I fully support this legislation. I see it firsthand, the terrible impacts the legislation in New York State has had on Niagara County. It just boggles my mind that some elected leaders look at this and think this is acceptable. I recently watched an interview on one of your news channels. A reporter asked Speaker Heastie about bail reform and raise the age. And part of his answer, again, boggles my mind, when he was told, Sheriff Baxter specifically, was really outspoken about bail reform and raise the age. His answer was, some people don't like change. Some people don't like change. No, some people don't like being victims of crime. That's your answer to the legislation that he championed, is some people don't like change. I don't like that change in my community, and I don't know if any of you like that change in your community, where you're victims because of poor legislation. I can't, again, advocate enough that we need help, and this is the help we need. And again, I want to thank everybody that's up here, that's standing behind this, trying to get this change done. It's needed, and I hope people make the right decision here and move forward with this. Not because I say it, but because the community is asking for it, and the community needs it, and they want to live in safe communities. So, thank you. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Senator Borrello.
Thank you, Sheriff. First, I want to start off by thanking my colleague, Senator Helming, for putting this forward. I mean, doing the right due diligence, listening to a broad spectrum of people. That doesn't happen much in Albany. Usually it's the most extreme advocates, they call them the advocates, that represent the most extreme views, that have the pen in their hand to craft things like bail reform. And then what do we hear from unfortunately, from those folks that pass these things? Don't believe your eyes. Don't believe your eyes when you see crime is spiking. And then they roll out some data from some lapdog organization like the Brennan Center saying everything's just fine. It's not fine, and that's the problem here. Look at what's going on around us. Most recently, Governor Hochul said no, we've given judges discretion. You know who doesn't think they have discretion? Judges. She's trying to convince them that they're wrong, that they're not smart enough to figure out what they did so that they can hold dangerous criminals. That's why you have the victims we've just been speaking about today. There is no judge's discretion. This is just another smoke and mirrors game by the other side of the aisle to pretend that they've done something to change this horrible, damaging law. Even in rural communities that I represent, areas where a court at night, where people show up to because they got a speeding ticket, they're seeing spikes in people not showing up for criminal offenses because they don't have to show up. That's the problem. Something needs to change, and that's what the PROTECT Act is about. You know, and there's this thing, oh, you're only going to put poor people in prison and the rich people are going to go. No, this is about dangerousness. It doesn't matter if you don't have a dollar to your name or you're a billionaire. If you're a danger to society, you'll be kept behind bars using a standard that's set forth that can be used evenly, judiciously. That's what needs to be done. You know, and it's really an insult to the people around us that don't believe your lying eyes, folks. Everything's just fine because the Brennan Center says so. People know that that it's no longer safe. Whether you're riding the subway in New York City or walking down the street in a community in Western New York, people don't feel safe. And if we don't address that, we're never going to be able to prosper here in New York State. The PROTECT Act is the foundation of restoring confidence in law enforcement, restoring confidence in criminal justice, and restoring confidence that we have a government that takes seriously the number one job, keeping people safe. And until that happens, New Yorkers will continue to suffer. And I'm proud to stand here with a broad cross-section of people. Leader, thank you very much for your leadership on this.
Thank you, my friend.
So just to close, and we'll take questions, I would only ask the media, if you have a question for a specific individual up here, just direct it to that individual. We'll do on topic. If there is off topic, we'll do that afterward. But to close, you know, there was a lot made about the data. And at the risk of, you know, being wrong, because I have a lot of police officers up here. But there's also, you know, as someone who's been in government and politics a long time, you know, I can find you a study or a data point to back up almost any position I take. And the same is true on the other side of the spectrum. But what I would say is the laws we have enacted since 2019, because they've changed the way officers police, there are a number of crimes that are no longer reported because they're not being reported. In some cases, not arrests are being made. The theft you heard about. So we're just locking up the toothpaste, locking up the goods, so that there is no one stealing it. Or if it is stolen, a lot of times these business owners, I'm not even going to waste my time because I know the guy's just going to be back here tomorrow, and now he's going to be angry. And really, it is changing. It is creating almost societal change in how some of these crimes are reported. So when you get the data points, that you have to take that into account. Those data points reflect the sort of new reality of post-bail reform, post-discovery reform, and all the other things that we've been talking about. And on the dangerousness standard, I have heard this now from very smart people, DAs, judges, police officers. We can make a whole mess about a lot of things. Just institute some level, some standard, some metric that everyone knows so that it's transparent and fair and it's applied evenly. But something that I would tell you that the two examples I listed, I know the one was out of state, but I'll use the police officer, the cop that shot the cop that was shot and killed in Queens or New York City, and Amanda Thompson. I would posit to you that were there a dangerousness standard, one or both of those individuals would not have been on the streets to commit those murders. Two people that we know of in these examples might be alive today if we had a standard, because we're talking about not the kid that stole a pack of cigarettes for the first time in his life at 17. We're talking about people who have been in and out of the criminal justice system and have victimized people over and over again being released. I'm just tired of seeing some victim of crime and you find out the person who was arrested 18 times before. And if you don't think that the average person in Niagara County, in Monroe County, in New York City is at home watching TV going, what the hell is happening? That makes no sense. It doesn't make sense. And so whatever look, when someone tells me carjacking isn't really a big crime, I think the sheriff, and I heard that, when someone says that, I got to be honest with you, they've lost me. I'm not on the same plane of reality with that person. If you would say to a serious person, if they would go up in front of the press or anybody else and say, well, carjacking, those aren't really, what's the big deal? Those aren't real crime. If that's the point we're in, then count me on the other side of whatever divide we're on. Because stealing someone's vehicle, a single mom who's got to get her kids to school, cars stolen, and if you think someone's stealing a vehicle, by the way, there was a high-speed chase. I was in Monroe County. couple months ago, there was a high-speed chase, car theft, high-speed chase. An older man was killed, 93 years old, was killed by the driver of the car. So it's no longer just a car theft, now it's vehicular manslaughter. So don't tell me it's not a serious crime. Every crime, all big fires start as small fires. Every career criminal started as a small criminal. I can promise that. They don't just start out with murder usually. It builds their way up. So that's why you need a dangerousness standard. That's why we need to take the handcuffs off of judges. Again, I want to thank Senator Helming. I want to thank Sheriff Todd Baxter, my colleagues in the legislature, certainly Sheriff Felicetti, for hosting. Him and I have had conversations about this for years. For years. I wouldn't say I don't always pick up his call when he calls me. I do. But I know when he's going to call, he's going to say, can we do something about this? How do we get something done? We have to get something done. And the point that Senator Helming is doing is trying to craft something that she's saying, you heard Sheriff Baxter, this isn't everything we want. This isn't everything our conference has advocated for. But our goal is to make people more safe. And if that means we have to do sort of half the pie or a compromised position that comes out of collaboration, that's what people should expect of elected leaders and not the alternative. So with that, I want to bring up Senator Helming. If there's questions on the bill, you can direct them to her. If there's a question for me or someone else, please let us know.
Senator Helming, if you could. Sir, we've been talking about this for a long time, and I ask this question almost every time. Do you see this working this time? Is there going to be a pushback from the other side of the aisle? Will this pass?
I am hopeful that we will be able to get this through this time. I think our best likelihood of having success is really putting pressure on the governor and getting her to incorporate this language into her budget. Passing it through the Senate and the Assembly as standalone budget language, I will tell you that I took advantage of a process that we're allowed to use in the Senate where I was able to prioritize this bill and try and push it through committee, and the bill failed to move out of committee pretty much along party lines. So I'm working with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle as well, some of the more reasonable people, I'd say, to just share with them how this is common sense. It's fair, it's balanced, it holds people accountable, it takes into consideration public safety, and that's why I think, too, we're trying to build this awareness about this bill, that it's a good, solid bill, and it will address the concerns that you're hearing from your constituents, regardless of where you live. They're afraid. They're afraid. When you think of my colleagues in New York City, there was a poll that just came out that asked people in New York City, how do you feel about public safety? Are you afraid? And the majority of them, I think it was in the high 70%, said yes, they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to become a victim of a crime. And subway ridership in New York City is down tremendously because people are afraid. So my message here is to my colleagues in New York City, you need to take a close look at this bill. And you know what? If there's something you want to change, or if you're not comfortable passing it because I'm a Republican, take my name off the bill. Put your own name on. Just do something to make sure that we get our streets safer. I just want to comment, too, because there's a lot said about bipartisanship. Here's an example right here in this room. I'm a Republican. The sheriff is a Democrat. Politics never even entered into the discussion. We just want to do what is right, what is best for our communities.
And is there a way to, you say about the people are scared, people are sick of the crime, is there a way to put it straight to the people, straight to the voters?
Good question. Good question. I mean, I think that's exactly what we're trying to do by traveling around the state and holding these press conferences and trying to create awareness. We've also drafted a letter that we'll be sending out to the governor that we're asking members of the public, business organizations, any other organizations to sign on to show her that this is important to people throughout your state. Be a leader and enact the changes that are needed.
Real quick, just to answer, to get it to directly the voters, we would still have to pass it through the legislature to then go on a ballot for the public. You know what I mean? So there's no way to circumvent the state legislature on this. So it just should be as easy to pass the law as opposed to pass it twice before it goes to a referendum.
Have you had that conversation with the governor at all? Any kind of dialogue on this?
I've had, like I said, a lot of dialogue on this subject with members of the governor's team, and also it went through, or I tried to put it through committee. I've talked about it on the Senate floor. Again, we have done so much press on this issue. We have done a letter to the governor. I'm looking for more signatures on that letter, again, from the general public, just to show her that this is important. We need to get it done.
Now, this doesn't completely repeal, the Bail Reform Act. Like,
Absolutely.
So you still have like appearance tickets for the lesser misdemeanors and?
This does not repeal bail reform. We were very careful. I knew that if we tried to take that step, that my colleagues would never entertain that idea. So what this does is it, creates the standardized risk assessment tool that a judge will use to determine whether someone is a threat to the community, to themselves, or to others, and whether or not they should be held pre-trial. Again, it puts all the focus on the dangerousness, and no consideration is given to the person's ability to afford bail, to be able to achieve bail and be released.
In terms of repeat offenders, you were talking about things like shoplifting, which is, I think, very different from domestic violence. Is someone who repeatedly shoplifting considered dangerous under this, or how does it work?
So I think that's a great question for law enforcement. This applies only to Class A misdemeanors and felonies. And as far as the repeat offenders and shoplifting,
Yeah, thank you. And I'll give the governor a credit, if you don't mind. She did, through her budget process, strike the term least restrictive means, which was really, about 3% of what we wanted, but it was a step in the right direction. And then she added harm and harm, which means if you're out and you commit harm, but there was no definition of larcenies and harm. Then that was added. And we're all looking at me like dazed right now because everybody's confused, right? Why? This is clean law. We're just saying clean the thing up. If someone's dangerous, here's the definition of dangerous, and a judge can consider that for pretrial. Here's what a repeat offender looks like. We can define it. It's very confusing right now in our criminal justice system. Police officers, DAs, judges, it keeps on getting tweaked every year a little. We're saying clean this whole thing up, just make it clean. But to give you an example of harm and harm or larcenies, we just had a guy that got paroled in January of this year. 2 years in state prison on 17 felony charges. I think he did 2 years in state prison, gets paroled. He's so brazen, he goes to the village of Brockport in the western side of Monroe County with a stolen U-Haul, him and another guy, and commit larcenies. They're filling up a U-Haul in broad daylight. This is a guy that just got paroled out of prison, right? That's how dangerous. And then he leads us on a pursuit, and he ends up in the Erie Canal killing his co-conspirator, right? This is dangerous, dangerous business. That was a co-conspirator, and God rest that guy's soul, he should not have died. But the perpetrator of that is the driver of that vehicle, a guy that just got released. This is dangerous business. Repeat offenders are dangerous. They're making irrational decisions and risking everyone else every day. And that U-Haul could have plowed through your intersection on your way home and killed you and your family. That's real world stuff. We've seen it in Monroe County. We got a 93-year-old gentleman dead because this is dangerous business. And that's all we're saying. Define what is dangerous. Make it transparent. Make it equal across the board. I'll give you one more example. We had a guy that we found out was a predator, and because he breached at St. John Fisher College and actually attacked a woman, an employee, and we did a 4-hour manhunt for that guy. We apprehended him. We found out he was doing the stalking for years before that, just didn't have enough in the town of Brighton to charge. He got released on $30,000 bail that night. That doesn't make him less dangerous. He's a stalker that finally breached, right? This is predictable targeted violence cases. And because he had $30,000, he's less dangerous. We had to call the victim the next day and apologize to her and try and set a security plan for her. Even though she fought him off one night and risked everything to kick that guy's you-know-what. And we were able to happen on him. Because he has means, again, this ain't about money. It has nothing to do with money. Actually, it's more fair, I think, across the board.
Assemblymember Morinello, you have, your background as a judge. I realize you served a different role, but could you kind of speak a little to the mindset, I guess, that comes with that, and sort of the pressures that they mentioned earlier when they were discussing?
The first thing I want to add is this. When a judge gets a case at the original arraignment, he has information available to him that is not available yet to the defense or to the public. So he's in a unique position to make these assessments. And multiple times, and I'll go back to my experience, I had what I called the repeat offenders, okay? They would come in on a Monday, they'd get released on Tuesday morning, they'd be back Wednesday morning. So in response to that question, a judge who is doing his job, and every judge should do the job, they have background information, they have knowledge, they have training to be able to assess this. Now, I just want to touch on the fact that they're claiming that there's less crime. Well, I want you to remember, with part of all the reforms, they reformed discovery. So prior to this, if somebody witnessed a crime, they would give their information. Their identity, their phone number, and their address would not be revealed until closer to trial. Now you must give it immediately. One of the first murders after the change in discovery happened in Niagara Falls on Niagara Street. I was able to find out later that the person that was shot in front of the convenience store and killed was going to be a witness in the grand jury in 2 days against a serious criminal. They murdered him. Okay, because they had his information instantaneously. So when you think about bail reform and you think about raise the age, they talked about the automobiles. The majority of those cars are being stolen by 16 and 17-year-olds who are doing it because they know there's nothing that's going to happen to them. They say probation is going to adjudicate them. These kids laugh at the poor probation officers. So in response, we have a judiciary that is experienced, that is trained, that has unique knowledge of what is happening. We need to begin to rely on them because they are the ones who can protect the future. And one more thing on domestic violence. Just as my colleague Senator Ortt spoke about during the budget negotiations and the bail changes, I, on my side, debated the domestic violence issue and tried to get them to understand that you cannot take domestic violence and consider it the same as larceny. Domestic violence is a power and control issue, and the judge is the only one that has the ability to take that power and control away from the abuser. But when the laws changed, they took that ability for that judge to take that power away. One other murder in Buffalo, that young mother, order of protection, violated numerous times, putting her kids in the car, getting ready to drive to school. The victim, the abuser, who had the order of protection, they couldn't hold him in jail because of the law, drives up with a shotgun and blows her head off in front of the children because our laws and our changes in our laws did not protect that victim. What they do? They protected the abuser. These poor children now have no mother, a father who's going to be in prison for murdering the mother, all because we couldn't allow the judge to have that dangerous consideration. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Senator, can you talk about what happened with the Amanda Thompson case? What was done, and would this protect her?
So I always say I'm certainly not a lawyer. I never like to play one. My understanding of the Amanda Thompson, which we talked about at the presser, and James Gardner, I thought, gave a great breakdown of sort of how the law works and how it failed Amanda. And you had, the way I say, you had from my vantage point, you had two breaches for Amanda. You had the initial breach, in my view, which is the parole board paroling an individual that I would have liked to have seen not early release, right? At the very least, finish out your sentence before you're released. I don't know, it's not like he was in there for a crime where you go, okay, well, no one died. Well, yeah, someone did die, right? I mean, he was there for taking a life. And so that was the first, and we've seen from the parole board between the people that have put on there, but we've seen releases of people that are responsible for cop killings, people that are responsible for crimes that used to be really hard to get paroled. Now it just seems a lot easier to get paroled. So that's the first thing. Now the second is, you heard,
He wasn't on parole anymore.
he was no longer on parole. But then there was an order of protection. There had been a police contact because of Amanda calling the police because of a domestic violence situation, and he was released. This law would allow the judge on that first domestic violence arrest or the first police contact where a judge could say, I think this guy is a danger to reoffend, is a danger to Amanda in this situation, the person who he's alleged to have abused. I'm going to hold him until either his trial or until this gets adjudicated. But at the very least, you're not going to send him right back out that same day. The issue is that it's that immediate return, effectively. So I just got into a battle with my girlfriend. I'm arrested. I'm released a couple hours later. What do we think is the likely outcome in that scenario? Especially with someone who's been to jail for taking someone's life. So to me, this is just a lot simpler. Now, I know in the law it's complicated, and I don't believe that it's the intent of some of my colleagues for this stuff to happen, but it is what is happening. We are giving a lot of benefit of the doubt to people that have shown no reason to get the benefit of the doubt. People that have raped, murdered, assaulted, time and again, robbed, time and again, we're saying, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. We think it's the wrong thing to incarcerate you. How do you look at a victim at that point of that person and say, we just didn't see it coming. We just missed it somehow. We failed. He said it, and he's right. We are failing in our mission to protect people. We are failing, and as a result, they're failing because we're restricting their ability to do what they need to do and to do what we ask them to do. So one thing I will never say is, usually, it's hard for me to say this specific bill in every situation would have, but I think it absolutely gives us more tools to prevent the future Amanda Thompsons from happening.
So right now, that judge could not have released it. Is that correct?
My understanding is right now,
I mean, he did say.
right. And I want to add too, for bail, all that means, that doesn't mean you have 30 grand in your pocket. That means you own something that is valued at 30 grand. Let's be honest, in today's day and age, that's not a high bar for a lot of people to get to, right? I mean, it's not like I think there's a sense that $30,000 bail, you wrote a check for $30,000. That's not necessarily true. A friend of mine could simply put up something of equal value, and I'm bailed out. I'm out of jail now. So that's the amount of bail in some cases is very low, even when it's set. And right now, they cannot consider any. There's all they can consider, if I'm not mistaken, is the defendant's ability to reappear in court, to show up. In other words, this person could have been arrested 17 times in the last month. I cannot consider that. I can only consider, you know what? In all those times, he always showed back up to court. So therefore, he's released on a desk appearance ticket or for a low bail amount or whatever it might be. I can't hold him because I can't look at him and say, you know what? You're a dangerousness to your spouse, to your family, to your community, and I can show you why you're a dangerousness. And we have a standard that sets the danger. So it's not just Rob Ortt's, Judge Mornello's objective opinion. It is a definable thing under the law that the judge could use to be able to say, based on that, you meet a dangerousness standard. And again, we're the only state in the country that does not allow for that to be taken into account. That should be a flag to me. Why? Why are we the only state? And if 49 other states are doing it, maybe they know better than we do on this one. Senator,
I just wanted to add something. To be clear, so under the PROTECT Act, a judge is required, the courts are required to do the standardized assessment and a complete evaluation within 48 hours. So it's not optional, they must do it under this legislation. And as the sheriff pointed out earlier, sometimes that 48 hours, like that wasn't just an arbitrary number we grabbed out of the sky. It was a number that law enforcement has said is sometimes if we could just hold a person for 48 hours, that's enough cooling off time for us to either get them mental health services or get them whatever other services they need, or just to cool them down so that they don't go out and commit another murder or whatever. But so just to be clear, it's mandatory that the courts use the standardized assessment form and do that full evaluation within 48 hours.
And just to be clear also, the arrest would have to be for like misdemeanor A or higher, right? It couldn't be like shoplifting or,
It has to be Class
It is a
A
misdemeanor.
or a felony, and law enforcement.
It can be.
Shoplifting is a misdemeanor, Depending on value, it could go to a felony, but Sheriff, why don't.
Yeah, that's a misdemeanor is petty larceny. So anything up to $1,000. So some of the shopliftings we're seeing are over $1,000, then it's a felony. So yes, it would be included.